Here is what they never told you in school. Here is what your teachers, your professors, your bosses, and every authority figure in your life has conveniently left out of the conversation. You have been lied to about what it means to be human. You have been programmed to believe that working 40, 50, 60 hours a week is normal, that grinding yourself into exhaustion is just part of being an adult, that rest is something you have to earn, that leisure is a luxury, that if you are not constantly productive, you are somehow failing at life. But what if I told you that for 99% of human history, our ancestors worked around 3 to 4 hours a day? What if I told you that the 40-hour work week is not some natural law of human existence, but a recent invention? What if everything you have been taught about progress, about civilization, about what makes a successful society was completely backwards? This is not some feel-good fantasy. This is documented anthropological fact. And the question we need to ask is simple. Why has nobody told you this before? In 1972, an anthropologist named Marshall Salins published something that would shake the foundations of how we understand human history. He called hunter-gatherer societies the original Affluent Society, not because they had stockpiles of wealth, not because they had technology or cities or agriculture, but because they had something we have lost. They had time. They had leisure. They had lives that were not consumed by labor. Salins studied groups like the Kung San people of the Kalahari Desert, the Hadza of Tanzania, Aboriginal Australians, who still lived in traditional ways. And what he found was shocking. These people, who we call primitive, who we imagine struggling to survive, were actually working between 15 and 20 hours per week. That is it, 3 to 4 hours a day gathering food, hunting, preparing meals. Social activities, art, music, storytelling, rest, play. Think about that for a moment. Our so-called primitive ancestors had more free time than you do, more free time than anyone you know, more free time than medieval peasants who, despite living under feudal lords, had something like 150 feast days and holidays per year. That is almost half the year off. When is the last time you had half the year off? The average American worker today gets around 10 to 14 days of vacation per year, if you are lucky. Many people do not even take the vacation days they have because they are afraid of falling behind, afraid of being seen as uncommitted, afraid of losing their jobs. We work more hours than medieval serfs. We have less leisure time than hunter-gatherers who lived 15,000 years ago. And somehow, we call this progress. But here is where it gets even stranger. This information is not hidden. It is not classified. It is sitting in anthropology journals, in university libraries, in academic papers that have been around for decades. Other researchers have confirmed his findings again and again. Studies of the Hadza people in Tanzania today show they work an average of 14 hours per week. Studies of the Jew/Hoanzi people in southern Africa found similar numbers. This is established science. So why did nobody teach you this in school? Why is this not part of every history curriculum? Why do we learn about the agricultural revolution as this great leap forward for humanity, when the evidence suggests it might have been the worst mistake our species ever made? Because if you knew the truth, you might start asking uncomfortable questions. You might start wondering why you are working yourself to death when your ancestors thrived on 20 hours of work per week. You might start questioning whether this system we live under is actually designed for human flourishing or for something else entirely. You might start realizing that the exhaustion you feel, the burnout, the sense that you are always behind, always struggling, always one step away from collapse, that is not a personal failing. That is not you being weak or lazy or unsuccessful. That is the system working exactly as designed. And here is the really dark part. When agriculture was invented around 10,000 years ago, when humans transitioned from hunting and gathering to farming, something terrible happened. Life got harder. Much harder. Skeletal evidence shows that early farmers were shorter than hunter-gatherers. Their bones show signs of malnutrition, of harder physical labor, of disease. Their teeth were worse. Their life expectancy dropped. They worked 12 to 14 hours a day in the fields, and they could not go back because once you have a farming society, your population explodes. You trap yourself. You need more food, so you farm more, so you can support more people who need more food, so you farm more. It is a cycle that has not stopped for 10,000 years. The anthropologist Jared Diamond called the agricultural revolution the worst mistake in the history of the human race. Not because farming itself is bad, but because it destroyed the way of life that humans had evolved to live. It took us from being a species with abundant free time, varied diets, strong social bonds, and relatively good health, and turned us into a species of laborers, farmers, workers, peasants, slaves. Think about the language we use. We talk about earning a living, as if living is something that must be earned through labor. We talk about making something of yourself, as if you are not already something. We talk about being productive members of society, as if your value as a human being is measured by your economic output. This is not normal. This is not how humans thought for most of our history. Your ancestors did not earn a living. They lived. They woke up when they wanted. They spent their afternoons talking, laughing, making art, telling stories, exploring, playing. They knew every plant, every animal, every star in the sky. They had encyclopedic knowledge of their environment that would put any modern person to shame. And they did not need alarm clocks or bosses or performance reviews to do it. So what happened? How did we go from that to this? How did we create a world where the average person spends most of their waking life doing things they do not want to do, for people they do not care about, to buy things they do not need, just to survive? How did we normalize 40-hour work weeks when the evidence shows that humans can thrive on 15? How did we convince ourselves that this is just the way things are? That is what we are going to explore, because this is not just about history. This is about right now. This is about why you are exhausted, why you never have enough time, why no matter how hard you work, it never feels like enough. And this is about what we could have instead if we were willing to ask the right questions and challenge the systems that keep us trapped. Before we go any further, let me introduce myself. I am Mr. H, and this is the kind of history they do not want you thinking about too deeply. If you are watching this late at night, maybe you cannot sleep. Maybe you are questioning everything about the way you are living your life. You are in the right place. This is mystery history for sleep. So get comfortable, maybe turn your screen brightness down, let this wash over you, and hey, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is right now. I love knowing there are people all over the world, lying in the dark, wondering if maybe we have been doing this whole civilization thing wrong. Now, let us dig deeper into the evidence they buried. So let us talk about Marshall Salins and why his work should have changed everything, but somehow did not. In 1968, Salins presented a paper at a symposium called Man the Hunter. This was during the height of the Cold War, during a time when Western capitalism and Soviet communism were both selling the same basic idea, that more stuff equals better life, that economic growth is the measure of human progress, that primitive societies were poor and miserable, and that we, the modern civilized world, had finally figured out how to live. Salins stood up and said something revolutionary. He said that hunter-gatherers were not poor, they were affluent, not despite having few possessions, but because they had few possessions. They had everything they needed and wanted nothing more. And most importantly, they had time, endless amounts of time, time that we, with all our technology and wealth and progress, somehow do not have. He called it the original Affluent Society, and he backed it up with hard data. Let us start with the Kungsan people, also known as the Jew/Hoansi, living in the Kalahari Desert of southern Africa. Anthropologists lived with them, watched them, timed them, recorded everything they did for months. What they found was remarkable. The Kungsan worked an average of 2.5 days per week. When they did work, it was usually for about 6 hours, but that included walking to gathering sites, socializing while collecting food, and walking back, maybe 3 to 4 hours. The rest of the week was free time, visiting relatives, telling stories, making art, playing games, resting, just living. And this was not because they were scraping by on the edge of starvation. Their diet was varied and nutritious. They ate over 75 different species of plants and animals. They consumed around 2,300 calories per day, which is comparable to modern recommended intake. They were not starving, they were thriving. One anthropologist noted that a Kung woman could gather enough mongongo nuts in one day to feed her family for 3 days. Mongongo nuts are incredibly nutritious, packed with protein and oil, and they grew abundantly in the Kalahari. Why would she gather more than she needed? She had no refrigerator, no storage, and honestly, she did not need it. She could get more whenever she wanted. So she worked one day and rested 2 days, then worked another day. This was normal. Now let us move to the Hadza people of Tanzania. Multiple studies done in the 1980s, 1990s, and even into the 2000s have confirmed the same pattern. Hadza adults work between 14 and 17 hours per week. That is it. They hunt, they gather, they prepare food, and then they are done. The rest of their time is spent in camp, socializing, napping, singing, dancing, telling stories. One researcher, Frank Marlowe, lived with the Hadza for years. He noted that Hadza camps had what he called a relaxed atmosphere. People were not stressed. They were not anxious about the future. If they were hungry, they went and got food. If they were not hungry, they did not. There was no boss telling them to be productive, no alarm clock, no performance metrics, no fear of getting fired or falling behind. They just lived. And here is something fascinating. The Hadza have almost no word for work in their language. The concept barely exists. They have words for specific activities: hunting, gathering, cooking, but the idea of work as this separate category of life, this thing you have to do whether you want to or not, that does not translate. Because for them, getting food is just part of living. It is not this oppressive thing that dominates their existence. Compare that to English. Think about how many words we have related to work and labor and productivity. Think about how much of our identity is wrapped up in what we do for a living. Think about how the first question people ask when they meet you is usually, "What do you do?" Meaning, what is your job? What is your economic function? We have built entire languages and cultures around the centrality of labor. The Hadza have not, and they are doing just fine. Aboriginal Australians tell a similar story. Before colonization, before their lands were stolen and their way of life destroyed, Aboriginal people lived in what might have been the longest-lasting sustainable culture in human history. 65,000 years of continuous culture. No collapse, no resource depletion, no wars of conquest, just sustainable living. How did they do it? By working as little as possible, by taking only what they needed, by having complex spiritual and cultural systems that taught them to live in balance with their environment, and by having abundant leisure time to develop art, music, ceremony, and oral traditions so sophisticated that they encoded detailed information about landscapes, animals, plants, stars, and history across millennia. Studies of Aboriginal groups before European contact found similar work patterns. A few hours a day gathering food, maybe a hunt every few days. The rest of the time spent in camp, in ceremony, in socializing. Anthropologist Frederick Rose documented Aboriginal groups in the 1960s working an average of 4 hours per day. But even that is misleading because they did not work every day. Some days they did nothing at all. Why would they? They had enough. Now here is where it gets interesting. And suspicious. All of this data has been available since the 1960s and 70s. Marshall Salins published his work in 1972. It was not hidden. It was peer-reviewed. It was cited. Studies kept coming in from all over the world, showing the same pattern. Hunter-gatherers work less. They have more leisure. They are healthier. They are happier. So why is this not common knowledge? Why did you not learn this in high school? Why do economics textbooks still talk about primitive societies as if they were poor and desperate? Why does the entire narrative of human progress still frame agriculture and civilization as this great leap forward when the evidence suggests it was a leap into a trap? Because this information is dangerous. It undermines everything our system is built on. If people knew that humans are not naturally inclined to work 40 to 60 hours a week, they might start asking why we do. If people knew that our ancestors were healthier and happier working 15 hours a week, they might start wondering what went wrong. If people knew that leisure and rest are not luxuries but actually the natural state of human existence, they might stop feeling guilty about wanting more free time. The system needs you to believe that work is noble, that hard work is the path to success, that if you are struggling, it is because you are not working hard enough. It needs you to feel guilty for resting. It needs you to internalize the idea that your value as a person is determined by your productivity. Because if you ever stopped believing that, if you ever realized that you could live a good life working 15 hours a week, the entire economic structure would collapse. Think about it. Our economy is built on consumption. You work long hours, so you are tired. So you buy convenience. Fast food instead of cooking. Expensive coffee instead of making it at home. Entertainment subscriptions because you are too exhausted to create your own fun. Therapy and medication to deal with the stress of overwork. You work to afford the things you need to cope with working. It is a perfect trap, but let us get back to the evidence. Because there is more, and it gets darker. When anthropologists compared the skeletons of hunter-gatherers to the skeletons of early agricultural peoples, they found something shocking. The farmers were shorter. Their bones showed signs of nutritional stress. Their teeth were full of cavities from eating grain-heavy diets. Their skeletons showed evidence of harder physical labor, repetitive strain injuries, arthritis. They had diseases that hunter-gatherers rarely had, and they died younger. This is not speculation. This is archaeology. You can measure this. Paleopathology, the study of ancient diseases, shows clearly that the transition to agriculture made people sicker. Life got harder, bodies got weaker, and yet we call this progress. Hunter-gatherers, by contrast, were tall, their bones were strong, their teeth were in good shape. They did not have the diseases of civilization. No diabetes, no heart disease, almost no cancer, no autoimmune disorders. Were they immune to disease? No, but the chronic lifestyle diseases that kill most people today barely existed. And here is the kicker. If a hunter-gatherer survived childhood, if they made it past the dangerous early years, they could expect to live into their 60s or 70s, not that different from modern lifespans. The idea that ancient people all died at 30 is a myth based on average lifespan, which includes high infant mortality. But adults? They lived long lives, healthy lives, active lives, into old age. So let us recap what the evidence actually shows. Hunter-gatherers worked 15 to 20 hours per week. They had abundant leisure time. They ate varied, nutritious diets. They were tall and healthy. They lived long lives if they survived childhood. They had rich cultural and social lives. They lived in balance with their environment for tens of thousands of years. Then came agriculture. Work hours skyrocketed to 60 to 80 hours per week in the fields. Diets became grain-heavy and nutritionally poor. People became shorter and sicker. Diseases spread more easily in crowded farming villages. Famine became common because relying on one or two crops is risky. Social hierarchies emerged as some people controlled the surplus. Warfare increased as groups competed for farmland, and humans became trapped in a cycle of population growth and increased labor that has not stopped for 10,000 years. This is not the story they teach you. This is not the narrative of progress that textbooks sell. But this is what the evidence shows, and anthropologists have known this for over 50 years. So why has it not changed the way we think about work, about civilization, about what it means to live a good human life? That is the question we need to sit with, because the answer is not comfortable. The answer is that our entire society is built on a lie. The lie that we need to work this hard. The lie that this is just human nature. The lie that there is no alternative. And those lies serve someone. They serve the people who profit from your labor. They serve the systems that need you exhausted and compliant and too busy to ask questions. Your ancestors knew better. They lived better. And that knowledge has been buried, not because it is wrong, but because it is true. And the truth is dangerous. Let me tell you about the moment everything changed. The moment humanity made a choice that we have been paying for ever since. Or maybe it was not a choice at all. Maybe it was something far stranger. Around 10,000 BC, in a region we now call the Fertile Crescent, something unprecedented happened. Humans who had been successfully hunting and gathering for 200,000 years suddenly started planting seeds. They started staying in one place. They started farming. And within a few thousand years, this practice spread across the entire world. Europe, Asia, Africa, the Americas. Independently, in multiple locations, humans made the same transition, from mobile hunter-gatherers to settled farmers. On the surface, this sounds like progress, like innovation, like humans getting smarter and figuring out a better way to live. That is certainly how it has been taught for generations. The agricultural revolution. Humans take control of their food supply. We stop wandering and start building. Cities rise. Writing is invented. Art flourishes. This is the story of human advancement. But what if that story is completely backwards? Jared Diamond, the Pulitzer Prize-winning scientist and author, wrote an essay in 1987 called "The Worst Mistake in the History of the Human Race." Not the worst mistake of ancient history, not a mistake. The worst mistake. And what was this catastrophic error? Agriculture. Diamond laid out the case methodically. Archaeology shows that when humans transitioned to farming, quality of life plummeted. Height decreased. Malnutrition increased. Disease spread. Infant mortality rose. Life expectancy dropped. Skeletal remains show that farmers had harder lives than foragers. Their bones tell stories of backbreaking labor, poor nutrition, and chronic illness. By every measurable health metric, the agricultural revolution made life worse. So why did it happen? If hunting and gathering was easier, healthier, and more enjoyable, why would anyone choose farming? Why would humans all over the world, independently, make the same terrible decision? The standard answer is that they did not know any better. That farming seems like a good idea when you first try it. Plant some seeds, get reliable food. What could go wrong? But here is the thing. Those early humans were not stupid. They had survived and thrived for hundreds of thousands of years. They knew their environments intimately. They understood seasons, weather patterns, animal behavior, plant cycles. These were people who could track an animal for days by reading bent grass and disturbed soil. You think they did not notice that farming made their lives harder? They noticed. Of course they noticed. But by the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. They were trapped. Here is how the trap works. You start planting crops. Maybe because wild food sources are declining. Maybe because your population is growing. Maybe for reasons we will get to in a moment. At first, farming supplements your diet. You still hunt. You still gather. But crops provide a stable baseline. And that stability allows something dangerous. Population growth. See, hunter-gatherer populations stay relatively small, not because they cannot have more children, but because a mobile lifestyle limits family size. You cannot carry more than 1 or 2 young children while traveling. You space births naturally, but when you settle down and start farming, that limitation disappears. You can have more children. So your population grows. And now you need more food. So you clear more land, plant more crops, and that supports more population growth, which requires more farming, which supports more growth. It is a feedback loop, a trap, and there is no way out, because if you try to go back to hunting and gathering, your population is now too large. There is not enough wild food to support everyone. You are locked in, but it gets worse. Because once you have stored grain, once you have surplus food sitting in granaries, something else emerges. Inequality, theft, violence, and the thing we call civilization. In a hunter-gatherer band, there is no wealth to accumulate. You cannot own more than you can carry. Food is shared because it spoils. There is no point in hoarding. Social structures are egalitarian. Leadership is based on skill and respect, not control of resources. But the moment you have stored grain, everything changes. Some people control the surplus. They decide who eats and who does not. They have power, and power, once it exists, does not give itself up. It justifies itself. It creates systems to perpetuate itself. Kings, priests, warriors, bureaucrats. The entire apparatus of the state emerges not to help humanity, but to control the agricultural surplus. To make sure the farmers keep farming, to make sure the grain keeps flowing to those in power. Ancient Sumerian texts, some of the oldest writing we have, are not poetry or philosophy. They are accounting records. Lists of grain, who owes what, who paid taxes, who is in debt. The very first writing system was invented to track who owned what, to control surplus, to manage labor, to keep people working, and here is where things get mysterious. Because Sumerian tablets also contain something else. Myths, stories, legends of a time before. The Sumerians wrote about ages of the world, cycles of creation and destruction. They wrote about the Anunnaki, beings who came from the stars and taught humans agriculture, metallurgy, writing. They wrote about a flood that destroyed the world and a time before when things were different. Now, you can dismiss this as mythology, as ancient people trying to explain the world without science. But what if they were remembering something real? What if the transition to agriculture was not a gradual choice, but a forced adaptation after some kind of catastrophe? Egyptian hieroglyphs reference a first time, the Zep Tepi, a golden age when gods walked among humans and life was different, a time of abundance and harmony. Then something ended it. The texts are vague, fragmented, but they remember a before time, a time that sounds a lot like the hunter-gatherer existence. Abundant food, leisure, no toil. And then something changed. Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey complicates everything we thought we knew. This is a massive stone temple complex built around 9600 BC. That is nearly 12,000 years ago. It required coordinated labor from hundreds of people. Massive stones, some weighing 16 tons, carved with intricate animal reliefs, transported and erected without metal tools, without wheels, without beasts of burden. And here is the kicker. Göbekli Tepe was built before agriculture. The people who made this were hunter-gatherers. The archaeological evidence is clear. No signs of domesticated plants or animals at the site. No permanent settlement. These were mobile foragers who came together periodically to build something monumental. So the story we have been told, that agriculture allowed civilization, that you need farming to support large-scale construction projects and complex society, is wrong. Hunter-gatherers built Göbekli Tepe. Then, after it was built, agriculture appeared in that exact region. What if the causation runs the other way? What if building these massive projects forced the adoption of agriculture to feed the workers? What if civilization came first, and farming was the unfortunate consequence? Or what if something else was happening? What if there was an event, a catastrophe, a change in climate or environment that forced humans to adopt agriculture as a survival strategy? The end of the last ice age was around 11,700 years ago. Massive climate shifts, rising sea levels, changing rainfall patterns, the extinction of megafauna. What if the comfortable hunter-gatherer lifestyle became impossible and humans had to adapt or die? Some researchers point to evidence of a comet impact or airburst around 10,800 BC. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, a cosmic event that caused rapid climate change, mass extinctions, and possibly the collapse of early human cultures. If this happened, if the world suddenly became unstable and unpredictable, farming makes sense. Not as a choice, but as desperate survival. You plant crops because wild food sources can no longer be trusted. You settle down because migration routes are disrupted. You accept the harder life because the alternative is starvation. And once you start, you cannot stop. The trap closes. Population grows. You are locked into farming forever. Ancient myths from around the world talk about catastrophes, great floods, fires from the sky, the earth shaking, the sun disappearing. Almost every culture has these stories, and they all place them at roughly the same time. the end of the last ice age, the transition to the Holocene, the moment when agriculture appeared. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe humanity remembers. Maybe buried in mythology is the truth about why we gave up the good life and accepted the trap of civilization, not because we were smarter or more advanced, but because we had no choice. Because something happened that forced us to adapt. And that adaptation, agriculture, became the foundation of everything we now call progress. But progress for whom? Not for the average person breaking their back in the fields. Not for the peasants and serfs and slaves who would spend the next 10,000 years laboring to support a tiny elite. Progress for the people in power. The ones who control the surplus. The ones who benefit from having a large, settled, controllable population. And here is the conspiracy that nobody talks about. What if agriculture was not just adopted but imposed? What if early states, early rulers, early priest classes pushed agriculture because it gave them power? Hunter-gatherers are hard to control. They move around. They have no surplus to tax. They do not need kings or priests or bureaucrats. They are free. But farmers? Farmers are stuck. They cannot leave their fields. They depend on stored grain that can be taxed, confiscated, controlled. They need protection from other groups who want their surplus, so they accept warriors and rulers. They need to know when to plant, so they accept priests who track the stars and seasons. Slowly, generation by generation, freedom is traded for security. Independence is traded for stability. And by the time anyone realizes what has been lost, it is too late to go back. Every ancient civilization has myths about a golden age, a time before, a paradise lost. The Greeks called it the Age of Chronos. The Hindus called it the Satya Yuga. The Chinese called it the Age of Perfect Virtue. The Hebrews called it Eden. All of them describe the same thing, a time when humans did not toil, when food was abundant, when life was easy. And then something happened. A fall, an expulsion, a theft, and humanity has been cursed to labor ever since. What if these myths are not just stories? What if they are cultural memories of the hunter-gatherer lifestyle, the original affluent society, the time before the trap closed, the time before agriculture bound us to endless labor? The Golden Age was not a myth. It was real. It was history. And we lost it. And now, 10,000 years later, we are still trapped. Still working ourselves to exhaustion. Still told that if we work hard enough, we can succeed, we can be free. But the trap does not open. So, the question remains, why did agriculture really happen? Was it choice? Was it catastrophe? Was it conspiracy? Maybe all three. Maybe the truth is more complex and more disturbing than we have been told. Maybe the agricultural revolution was not the beginning of civilization, but the end of human freedom. And maybe, just maybe, the evidence of what really happened has been buried, suppressed, forgotten. Why we are still trapped in a system designed 10,000 years ago. Why we have let the biggest mistake in human history define the rest of our existence. That is what they do not want you to think about. Picture this. 32,000 years ago. The last ice age. Europe is frozen. Survival should be brutal. Every moment should be dedicated to not dying, finding food, staying warm, fighting off predators. This is how we imagine prehistoric life, right? Now picture a group of humans descending deep into a cave in what is now southern France. They are carrying torches made from animal fat and plant fibers. They are carrying pigments, red ochre, black manganese, yellow clay. They have carved bone tools, delicate and precise. And they are going into this cave not to hide from danger, not to store food, not for any practical survival reason. They are going to make art. This is Chauvet Cave. Discovered in 1994, it contains some of the oldest known cave paintings in the world, over 32,000 years old. They are masterpieces, horses in motion, their muscles perfectly rendered, lions stalking, rhinoceroses charging, bears, mammoths, panthers, all depicted with such skill and understanding of anatomy that modern artists are left speechless. These paintings were not made quickly. They were not survival activities. Someone had to gather the materials, mix the pigments, prepare the cave walls, sketch the designs, paint the final images. This took hours, days, maybe weeks. And here is the question nobody asks. Where did they get the time? If these people were barely surviving, if every hour was dedicated to finding enough food to make it to tomorrow, when did they paint? When did they develop the skills to paint this well? You do not create something like Chauvet Cave on your lunch break. You do it because you have leisure, because you have free time, because your basic needs are met, and you have energy and hours left over to create beauty for its own sake. But it gets better, or stranger, depending on how you look at it. Chauvet is not unique. Lascaux Cave, painted around 17,000 years ago, contains nearly 600 paintings and thousands of engravings. Altamira in Spain, Cosquer Cave, Fontjaume, all over Europe, all through the last ice age, humans were going underground to create elaborate, sophisticated art. And these caves were not living spaces. They were not shelters. Archaeological evidence shows that humans did not live in these painted caves. They went there specifically to paint. They went there for ceremonies, for gatherings, for reasons that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with culture, spirituality, and creative expression. This is leisure. This is what people do when they have time, when they have lives that are not consumed by endless labor. Now think about what this means. The same people we call primitive cavemen were creating art that rivals anything produced in the Renaissance. They were organizing group expeditions into dangerous cave systems. They were developing sophisticated techniques for making pigments and paints that have lasted 30,000 years. They were passing down artistic traditions across generations. This is not the behavior of people struggling to survive. This is the behavior of people thriving. And it is not just painting. Archaeologists have found flutes made from bird bones and mammoth ivory dating back 40,000 years. Flutes, musical instruments. Someone carved hollow tubes, drilled precise holes, and played music. For what? For fun. For ceremony. For the joy of making sound. Again, this takes time. This takes leisure. This takes a society where people are not working themselves to death just to eat. We have found carved figurines. The Venus of Hohlefels, carved from mammoth ivory 40,000 years ago. Intricate, detailed, clearly made by someone with extraordinary skill. The Lion Man of Hohensteinstadel, a human figure with a lion's head, carved from mammoth ivory over 40,000 years ago. This single sculpture is estimated to have taken 400 hours to create. 400 hours. That is 10 weeks of full-time work. Who has 400 hours to spend carving a sculpture unless they have abundant free time? Let me say that again because it is important. 40,000 years ago, during the Ice Age, someone spent 400 hours creating a piece of art that served no survival function, and their society supported them, gave them the time and space to create. That is what real affluence looks like. Not stockpiles of grain, not bank accounts. Time. The ability to spend 400 hours making something beautiful just because you can. And this is worldwide. Aboriginal Australians have rock art sites dating back 65,000 years. 65,000. Africa has rock engravings and paintings tens of thousands of years old. Humans have been creating art, music, and ceremonial objects for as long as we have been human. This is not something that started with civilization. This is something civilization almost destroyed. Now let us talk about Göbekli Tepe again, but from a different angle. We mentioned it was built before agriculture, but think about what that actually means. This site has massive stone pillars arranged in circles. Some pillars are 20 feet tall and weigh 16 tons. They are carved with reliefs of animals: scorpions, lions, bulls, foxes, snakes, birds. Each pillar is unique. Each one is a work of art. Building this required planning, engineering, logistics. You need to quarry the stones, transport them, shape them, carve them, and erect them. You need teams of people working together. You need leadership and coordination. And you need to feed everyone while they are working on this project that produces no food, no shelter, no immediate survival benefit. It is a temple, a gathering place, a ceremonial center. It is architecture as art. Hunter-gatherers built this. People working 3 to 4 hours a day gathering food built one of the most impressive archaeological sites in the world. And the mainstream narrative still calls them primitive, still suggests that complex culture requires agriculture and cities and states. But the evidence says otherwise. The evidence says that before farming, before civilization, before the trap closed, humans had the time and energy and social organization to create wonders. And here is where it gets deliberately buried. Why do textbooks spend so much time on the agricultural revolution and the rise of cities, and so little time on the 50,000 years of human achievement before that? Why are Paleolithic cultures dismissed as Stone Age primitives when they were creating art and music and architecture that we still cannot fully understand or replicate? Because acknowledging their sophistication undermines the entire narrative of progress. If Ice Age hunter-gatherers had rich, complex, artistically vibrant cultures, then civilization is not an improvement. It is just different. And maybe worse. Maybe we traded music for monotony. Maybe we traded freedom for control. Modern anthropologists who study remaining hunter-gatherer societies have documented something fascinating. In groups like the Hadza, the Jew/Hoanzi, the Piraha of the Amazon, people spend more time playing, dancing, and participating in ceremonies than they do acquiring food. Work is the minority of their time. Culture is the majority. The Hadza have elaborate storytelling traditions. They dance almost every night. They sing. They play games. Ethnographers have noted that Hadza camps are filled with laughter, with conversation, with people enjoying each other's company. This is what humans do when we have time. We create. We connect. We play. The Piraha of the Amazon are famous among linguists for having one of the most unique languages on Earth. No numbers, no perfect tense, no recursion. Their language exists entirely in the present moment, and they spend their days singing, talking, fishing a little, gathering a little, and enjoying life. One anthropologist described them as the happiest people he has ever encountered. No depression, no anxiety, no existential dread. Just living. But these cultures are disappearing. Governments call them undeveloped. Corporations want their land. Missionaries want to save their souls. And so the last remaining examples of how humans naturally live are being erased. Not because they are failing, but because their existence is inconvenient. Because they prove that you do not need industrial capitalism to have a good life. Because they show that leisure is natural and work is the aberration. Here is what they do not tell you in museums. When archaeologists find a carved bone, a painted cave, a ceremonial site, they are looking at evidence of free time. They are looking at proof that ancient people had hours and days and weeks to dedicate to non-survival activities. Every piece of prehistoric art is evidence against the idea that life was a brutal struggle. Every flute, every sculpture, every elaborate burial with grave goods is proof that people had time to care about more than just staying alive. And the sheer volume of this evidence is staggering. We are not talking about a few rare examples. We are talking about tens of thousands of sites, hundreds of thousands of artifacts, cave paintings in France, Spain, Italy, Africa, Australia, South America, carved figurines from Germany to China, musical instruments from Europe to Asia, ceremonial sites on every inhabited continent. This is not the exception. This is the rule. Humans have always made art. Humans have always had leisure. Until very recently. Think about modern life. How much art do you create? How much music do you make? How much time do you spend dancing, singing, telling stories, carving, painting? For most people, the answer is none, or almost none. We buy it, we stream it, but we do not make it. We do not have time. We are too busy working. Our ancestors, the ones we call primitive, spent more of their lives engaged in creative and cultural activities than we do. They had richer artistic traditions. more communal experiences, more time for beauty and meaning and connection. And we call this progress? We call this advancement? We traded the life of an artist for the life of a worker and convinced ourselves we are better off. This is the forbidden archaeology. Not hidden temples or lost civilizations. The forbidden truth is that human culture peaked before agriculture, that the richest, most creatively vibrant period of human existence was when we worked the least, that everything we have built since then, all our cities and technologies and institutions, has come at the cost of what makes us human: time, freedom, creativity. They do not teach this because if you knew it, you might stop working. You might start asking why you spend 40 hours a week doing something you hate when your ancestors spent 40 hours a week making art, making music, making love, making meaning. You might realize that the system has stolen from you something more valuable than money. It has stolen your time, your one irreplaceable resource, the hours of your life, and those hours are never coming back. Every hour spent in a job you do not care about is an hour you could have spent creating something beautiful, playing with your children, exploring the world, just being alive. Your ancestors knew this. The evidence of what they did with their time is painted on cave walls, carved in bone, built in stone. They made art because they could, because they had time, because that is what humans do when we are free. We are not free anymore, and the archaeology of leisure is forbidden because it reminds us what we lost. So here is a question that should bother you. How did we go from knowing that 3-hour workdays are natural to believing that people who do not work 60 hours a week are lazy? How did an entire species forget what we are actually designed to do? The answer is not an accident. It is not natural evolution. It is programming, deliberate, systematic, psychological programming that started with religion and perfected itself through capitalism. Let us go back to 16th century Europe. The Protestant Reformation is happening. Martin Luther nails his 95 Theses to a church door in 1517. The religious landscape is fracturing, and out of this chaos emerges something new, a theology that will shape the next 500 years of human misery. The Protestant work ethic. Before this, Christianity had a complicated relationship with work. Medieval Catholicism saw manual labor as punishment for original sin. Work was necessary but not virtuous. Leisure, contemplation, prayer, those were the paths to God. Monks did not work 40-hour weeks. They prayed, they studied, they lived communally with their needs met. The wealthy did not work at all. They had leisure, and nobody thought this was wrong. But Protestant reformers, especially John Calvin, flipped this entirely. Calvin preached predestination, the idea that God has already chosen who goes to heaven and who goes to hell. You cannot change it. You cannot earn salvation. It is already decided. So how do you know if you are saved? By your success in worldly affairs, by your wealth, by your productivity. Work became proof of divine favor. Idleness became sin. Read that again. Idleness became sin. Rest became evil. Leisure became the devil's playground. Idle hands are the devil's workshop. This phrase, this idea, wormed its way into Western consciousness and never left. Suddenly, working hard was not just necessary. It was moral. It was how you proved your worth to God and to society. And this was not just theology. This was social control. Protestant regions needed workers. They needed people who would labor without complaint, who would see suffering as noble, who would accept low wages as God's will. The Protestant work ethic gave them exactly that. A population that felt guilty for resting, that associated poverty with moral failure, that believed the rich deserved their wealth because God favored them. Max Weber, the German sociologist, wrote about this in 1905. He called it the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism. He showed how Protestant theology created the perfect psychological conditions for capitalism to flourish. Pride in work, acceptance of inequality, belief that suffering builds character. This was not accidental. This was a system of belief designed to make people accept exploitation. And it worked. Oh, it worked beautifully. By the time the Industrial Revolution arrived in the 1700s and 1800s, You had populations pre-programmed to work themselves to death and feel virtuous about it. Picture England in 1830. The factories are roaring, coal smoke chokes the air, and inside those factories, children as young as 5 years old work 14 to 16 hours a day. 5 years old. Standing at machines for 16 hours, breathing toxic air, losing fingers, hands, arms to mechanical accidents, dying of exhaustion and disease. And this was legal. This was normal. This was progress. Adults worked 16-hour days, 6 or 7 days a week. Factory owners calculated exactly how much labor a human body could endure before it broke. And they pushed right up to that line, because workers were replaceable. There were always more people desperate enough to take a job, at any wage, under any conditions. And here is the key. Workers tried to fight back. They organized. They demanded shorter hours, better pay, basic safety, and they were crushed. Factory owners hired private armies. Governments sent in troops. Labor organizers were arrested, beaten, killed. Strikes were broken with violence. And the entire apparatus of state power was deployed to keep workers working, because the system needed them working. The factory owners were getting rich beyond imagination. The British Empire was built on factory output. Capitalism was proving itself the most efficient wealth extraction machine ever invented, and it required one thing above all else: compliant workers who showed up and did not ask questions. Then something interesting happened. Henry Ford, in 1914, implemented the 40-hour work week and doubled wages. And history books teach this as generosity, as Ford being a visionary who cared about his workers. Ford did not do this out of kindness. He did it because workers kept quitting. Turnover was so high that he was losing money training new people. The work was so brutal that even desperate people would not stay. So Ford calculated. He figured out the minimum wage and maximum hours that would keep workers from leaving while still extracting maximum profit. It was the scientifically determined threshold of exploitation. Work people more than 40 hours and they quit or die. Work them less and you are leaving profit on the table. 40 hours was the sweet spot, and we have been stuck there ever since. But here is what they do not tell you. Workers did not stop fighting for less. Some demanded 20. Some even demanded 15. They pointed out that productivity was skyrocketing. Machines were doing more work. Why should humans work the same hours when machines were making things easier? The Kellogg Company in Battle Creek, Michigan, implemented a 6-hour workday in 1930. Not 40 hours a week, 30 hours. And it worked. Workers were happier, healthier, more productive. Turnover dropped, quality improved. The company profited. This was proof that shorter hours were possible and beneficial. So what happened? Why are we not all working 30-hour weeks? The Depression happened. World War II happened. And in the chaos, corporate interests reasserted control. After the war, there was a deliberate propaganda campaign to establish the 40-hour week as normal, as American, as the price of prosperity. The post-war economic boom was framed as reward for hard work. The American dream was sold. Buy a house, buy a car, buy appliances, buy. And to buy, you must work. 40 hours minimum. More if you want to get ahead. Labor unions, which had been pushing for shorter hours, were systematically dismantled. Union leaders were accused of being communists. Anti-labor laws were passed. Right-to-work laws. At-will employment. The legal protections that workers had fought and died for were stripped away, and the 40-hour week became so normalized that questioning it seemed crazy. Now let me tell you about a prediction that should haunt us. In 1930, the economist John Maynard Keynes wrote an essay called Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren. He predicted that by the year 2000, technological progress would be so advanced that people would only need to work 15 hours per week. 15. He thought the biggest challenge facing future generations would be what to do with all their leisure time. He imagined a world where the problem was not scarcity but abundance, not poverty but boredom. What happened? Keynes was right about productivity. Technology advanced faster than he predicted. One worker today produces 4 times more than a worker in 1930. 4 times. If productivity quadrupled, why did work hours not drop? Why are we not working 10 hours a week and living like kings? Because the gains went up, not down. Productivity increased 400%. Worker wages increased maybe 20% when adjusted for inflation. And CEO pay increased over 1,000%. The wealth generated by increased productivity did not go to workers. It went to shareholders, to executives, to the owner class. Workers kept working 40 hours because if they did not, someone else would. The surplus was captured at the top. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is documented economic fact. You can look at productivity charts and wage charts and see the moment they diverge. 1973. That is when productivity keeps climbing and wages flatline. For 50 years, American workers have been producing more and more value and seeing none of it. All of it. Every dollar of increased productivity went to people who were already rich, and nobody talks about it. Why? Because the system needs you not to talk about it. It needs you to believe that if you are struggling, it is your fault. You are not working hard enough. You did not get the right degree. You are not hustling. You are not optimizing. The problem is you, not the system. That is the lie. That is the programming. Now let us talk about David Graeber and his book Bullshit Jobs. Graeber was an anthropologist and anarchist who asked a simple question. If technology has made us so productive, why are we working more than ever? And why do so many jobs feel completely pointless? He surveyed thousands of workers and found something shocking. 40% of people believe their job makes no meaningful contribution to the world. 40%. Lawyers writing contracts nobody reads. Consultants making presentations nobody uses. Middle managers managing other middle managers. Entire industries of people shuffling papers, attending meetings, sending emails, and producing nothing of actual value. These are not lazy people. These are people desperate to do something meaningful and trapped in jobs that exist only to justify other jobs. Jobs that could disappear tomorrow and society would not notice. But they pay the bills. So people keep showing up, keep pretending their work matters, keep dying inside a little bit every day. And here is the conspiracy. Bullshit jobs are not an accident. They are a feature. Because if people worked less, if they only did necessary work, they would have time. Time to think. Time to organize. Time to question why society is structured this way. Time is dangerous. Free people are dangerous. So the system creates meaningless work to keep people busy, tired, and distracted. You want to know who benefits from you working 40, 50, 60 hours a week? Not you. You are exhausted. You are stressed. You barely see your family. You have no time for hobbies, for friends, for yourself. You are surviving, not living. Your employer wins. They extract maximum value from your labor while paying you as little as possible. They collect profits generated by your work while contributing nothing. The consumer economy wins. You are so tired from work that you buy convenience. Fast food, entertainment subscriptions, gadgets to make life easier. You work to afford the things you need because you work. The system wins. A population that is overworked is a population that is compliant. Too tired to protest. Too busy to organize. Too stressed to imagine alternatives. You think it is a coincidence that as work hours increase, political engagement decreases. You think it is an accident that the countries with the longest work hours have the weakest labor movements. This is control. This is how you keep a population from demanding better. You work them until they are too exhausted to fight. You convince them that rest is laziness. You program them to feel guilty about wanting less. You make them believe that their worth is measured by their productivity. And then you extract everything they have. The Protestant work ethic was the beginning. The Industrial Revolution weaponized it. 20th century capitalism perfected it. And now, here we are, working more than medieval peasants, working more than our grandparents, working more than any generation in history despite having technology that should have freed us. And we call this normal, but it is not normal. It is not natural. It is a cult, the work cult, and like any cult, it requires constant reinforcement. Hustle culture, rise and grind. Sleep when you are dead, glorification of overwork, shame for rest. Entire industries built around productivity hacks and time management, and optimizing every second of your life to produce more, achieve more, be more. And for what? So someone else can get richer? So you can collapse into bed every night too exhausted to remember who you are or what you wanted from life? Your ancestors worked 3 hours a day and spent the rest of their time living. You work 8, 10, 12 hours a day and spend the rest of your time recovering. And somehow you have been convinced that this is success. This is progress. This is the best humanity can do. It is not. It never was. And the evidence has been in front of us the whole time. We just were not allowed to see it, because seeing it would mean questioning everything. And questions are dangerous to people who profit from your exhaustion. Your body is trying to tell you something. That exhaustion you feel is not normal. That anxiety keeping you up at 3 a.m. is not just in your head. That burnout, that sense that you cannot keep going like this, that feeling that something fundamental is broken, your body is screaming at you, and it has been screaming for a long time, but nobody is listening. Or worse, the people who should be listening are actively ignoring it because your suffering is profitable. Let me give you some numbers that should terrify you. In the United States, 77% of people regularly experience physical symptoms caused by stress. 77%. That is not a small subset. That is almost everyone. Headaches, muscle tension, fatigue, chest pain, upset stomach. Your body is breaking down from stress. And the primary source of that stress? Work, job pressure, long hours, job insecurity, toxic work environments. 73% of people experience psychological symptoms from stress, anxiety, depression, irritability, feeling overwhelmed. 33% of people, 1 in 3, report feeling like they are living with extreme stress. This is not a mental health crisis. This is a work crisis. This is what happens when you force humans to live in ways they were never designed for. Now let me tell you what we do not see in hunter-gatherer populations. Clinical depression, almost non-existent. The Hadza people? Researchers have looked for depression. They cannot find it. Same with anxiety disorders. Panic attacks. They do not have them. Or they are so rare that anthropologists living with these groups for years never encounter a single case. How is that possible? How can an entire population not experience the mental illnesses that plague modern society? Because they are not sick. Depression is not a chemical imbalance that randomly appears in human brains. It is a response to living in environments that are fundamentally wrong for our species. You take a human, you isolate them from community. You trap them in artificial light for 8 to 10 hours doing repetitive, meaningless tasks. You remove them from nature, you stress them constantly about money and status and performance, and their brain breaks. Of course it breaks. It is supposed to break. That is the warning system telling you to stop. But instead of changing the environment, we medicate the person. Antidepressants are now one of the most prescribed medications in America. Over 13% of Americans over age 12 are on antidepressants. 13%. And that number keeps growing. We are not fixing the problem. We are numbing people enough to keep them functional, keep them working, keep them producing. And do not even get me started on autoimmune diseases. Conditions where your body attacks itself. Rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, type 1 diabetes. These diseases are exploding in modern populations, and they are virtually absent in hunter-gatherer societies. The Hadza do not get autoimmune diseases. The Tsimane people of Bolivia, who still live semi-traditionally, almost never get them. Why? Because autoimmune diseases are triggered by chronic stress, poor diet, lack of sleep, environmental toxins, and constant activation of the fight or flight response, all things that define modern life. All things absent in hunter-gatherer life. Your immune system is confused because you are living in a state of constant threat. Your body thinks it is being attacked every day, so eventually it starts attacking itself. Heart disease. The number one killer in America. Hunter-gatherers? They do not get it. The Tsiman have the healthiest hearts ever studied. Researchers did CT scans and found that an 80-year-old Tsimane person has the vascular age of an American in their mid-50s. Their arteries are clean, their blood pressure is normal, their cholesterol is fine, and this continues into old age. Why? Because they are not stressed. They move naturally throughout the day. They eat real food. They sleep well. They have strong social connections. All the things we know prevent heart disease. All the things modern work culture makes impossible. Let us talk about sleep. Hunter-gatherers sleep 9 to 10 hours per night, sometimes more in winter. They go to bed when it gets dark. They wake up naturally. No alarms. Their sleep is deep and restorative because they are not chronically stressed, and during the day they nap. Rest when tired. This is how humans are supposed to sleep. How much do you sleep? The average American gets 6 to 7 hours. 40% of Americans get less than 7 hours. We are living in a state of chronic sleep deprivation, and sleep deprivation is linked to literally every health problem you can name. Obesity, diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's, cancer, depression, anxiety, weakened immune system. Your body repairs itself during sleep. If you do not sleep enough, you do not repair. You break down, and why do we not sleep? Because we work too much. Because we are stressed. Because we are looking at screens late at night. Because our entire society is designed to keep us stimulated and exhausted and never truly resting. And then we wonder why everyone is sick. Now here is where it gets sinister. Studies have been done. Actual scientific studies on reducing work hours. And the results are clear, unambiguous. When people work less, their health improves dramatically. Iceland ran a massive trial from 2015 to 2019. Over 2,500 workers across multiple industries moved to a 4-day work week with no reduction in pay, 32 hours instead of 40. The results? Stress decreased, burnout decreased, health improved, sleep improved, work-life balance improved, and productivity either stayed the same or increased. People working fewer hours got the same amount done, sometimes more, because they were not exhausted. Similar trials in Spain, Belgium, the United Kingdom, New Zealand all showed the same thing. Less work equals better health. This is not controversial. This is proven. The evidence is overwhelming. So why has nothing changed? Why are we not all working 4-day weeks? Because corporations do not want to. Even when presented with evidence that shorter weeks improve productivity, they resist. Because control matters more than results. Because the system is not designed to maximize human well-being. It is designed to maximize profit extraction. And changing the system would require admitting that the current system is broken. That it is hurting people. That 50 years of overwork has been a massive policy failure. In 2019, Microsoft Japan tested a 4-day work week. Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. Productivity increased 40%. 40%. Employees were happier, healthier, more engaged. Microsoft published the results. And then did nothing. They did not implement it permanently. They did not expand it. They just filed the data away and went back to business as usual. Why? Because admitting that workers could be 40% more productive working 32 hours instead of 40 undermines everything. Every justification for long hours falls apart. And it is not just private companies. Academic research on work hours gets minimal funding. Studies showing that less work improves health are published in journals and ignored by policymakers. Why? Because implementing shorter work weeks would require systemic change. It would require rethinking how we structure society, and there are powerful interests invested in keeping things exactly as they are. Think about who profits from you being sick. The pharmaceutical industry made over $600 billion in 2021. $600 billion, treating chronic diseases caused largely by stress, overwork, and poor lifestyle. Antidepressants alone are a $15 billion industry. Blood pressure medications, diabetes medications, cholesterol medications, sleep aids, anti-anxiety medications, pain relievers. The medical industrial complex makes a fortune keeping you functional enough to work, but never actually healthy. What happens if people start working less? If stress decreases? If mental health improves? If chronic diseases decline? Pharmaceutical companies lose billions, hospitals lose patients, the entire healthcare industry, which represents almost 20% of the US economy, contracts. So there is no incentive to fix the root cause. There is only incentive to manage symptoms. Keep people sick but working. That is the model. That is the system. And here is the cruelest irony. You work long hours to afford health insurance, to afford medications, to afford treatment for stress-related illnesses. But the work is what is making you sick. You are trapped in a cycle where you destroy your health to pay for the consequences of destroying your health. And the system profits at every step. Your employer profits from your labor. Insurance companies profit from your premiums. Pharmaceutical companies profit from your prescriptions. Hospitals profit from your treatments. Everyone wins except you. Hunter-gatherers who survive childhood live into their 70s and 80s. They die of old age, not of preventable chronic diseases. They do not spend the last 20 years of their lives managing diabetes, heart disease, and dementia. They stay active and healthy until near the end, because their lifestyle, working a few hours a day, eating real food, moving naturally, sleeping well, having strong communities, that is what humans need to thrive. We know this. The medical research is clear. But implementing it would mean dismantling systems that powerful people benefit from. So instead, we are told that stress is inevitable, that burnout is a personal failing, that if you are sick, it is because of your genetics or your choices, not because society is structured in a way that makes health nearly impossible. Your body knows the truth. It is trying to tell you. Every headache, every sleepless night, every moment of crushing exhaustion is a message. You are not designed for this. You are not built to work this way. And no amount of medication or therapy or self-care can fix a problem that is structural. That is systemic. That is by design. The health catastrophe is not hidden because we do not know about it. It is hidden because acknowledging it would require change. Real change. And change threatens profit. So they will keep medicating you, keep treating symptoms, keep telling you that this is normal, that this is just life, that everyone feels this way. But everyone does not feel this way. Just everyone trapped in the same broken system. And your ancestors, who worked 3 hours a day, they felt fine. So here is the thing about evidence. When something works, when you run an experiment, and it succeeds beyond expectations, you scale it up, right? You implement it everywhere. You change policy. You revolutionize the system. That is how science is supposed to work. That is how progress happens, unless the evidence threatens the wrong people. Let me tell you about Iceland. Not the tourist version with glaciers and northern lights. The Iceland that ran the largest trial of reduced work hours in the world and proved, definitively, that the 40-hour work week is obsolete, and then watched as the rest of the world ignored it. From 2015 to 2019, Iceland tested something radical. They took 2,500 workers, about 1% of the entire working population, and moved them to a 35 or 36-hour work week. For some, it was 4 days instead of 5. For others, it was shorter days. But everyone worked less. And critically, everyone kept the same pay. This was not a pay cut. This was simply working less for the same money. The trial included workers from all sectors: government offices, preschools, hospitals, service centers, a genuine cross-section of the workforce, and researchers tracked everything: health, stress levels, work-life balance. They wanted comprehensive data on what happens when people work less. The results came in. Productivity stayed the same or improved. Let me repeat that. People working fewer hours got just as much done. In some departments, they got more done. Why? Because well-rested, less stressed workers are more efficient. They make fewer mistakes. They focus better. They do not waste time pretending to be busy when they are actually exhausted. But the real impact was on well-being. Stress and burnout decreased dramatically. Workers reported sleeping better, spending more time with family, having energy for hobbies, feeling healthier and happier. Mental health improved across the board. This was not a minor improvement. This was life-changing for thousands of people. So Iceland implemented it nationwide, right? Changed their labor laws? Became a model for the world? Not exactly. The trials ended in 2019. The data was published in 2021, and the global media coverage was minimal. A few articles. Some buried reports. Nothing major. Nothing that would force governments or corporations to pay attention. Why? Because Iceland proved that the system is a choice, that we do not have to live this way, that shorter work weeks are not just possible but beneficial. And that is dangerous information. If workers everywhere knew that Iceland succeeded, they would start demanding the same. Unions would mobilize, political pressure would build, the entire justification for 40-hour weeks would collapse. Now let us talk about Microsoft Japan. In August of 2019, Microsoft gave all employees 5 consecutive Fridays off, a month of 4-day work weeks, and they tracked productivity. The result? Productivity increased by 39.9%, almost 40%. Sales per employee shot up. Electricity costs dropped by 23% because offices were closed Fridays. Paper printing dropped by nearly 60%. Microsoft published these results. They wrote up reports. They shared the data. And then they stopped. They did not make the 4-day week permanent. They did not expand the trial. They ran one of the most successful productivity experiments in corporate history and then just moved on like nothing happened. Think about that. A 40% productivity increase. That is staggering. That is revolutionary. Any other business innovation that increased output by 40% would be implemented immediately and copied by every competitor. But when it comes to giving workers more free time, even when it improves results, corporations will not do it, because it is not really about productivity, it is about control. There is a company in New Zealand called Perpetual Guardian. They tested a 4-day work week in 2018, reduced hours, same pay, and it worked so well that they made it permanent, not temporary, not a trial, permanent policy. Employee stress dropped, work-life balance improved, productivity stayed high. The company founder became an advocate, traveling the world telling other businesses to do the same. And how many companies followed? Almost none. Perpetual Guardian has been shouting the results from the rooftops for years. The evidence is public. The model is proven, and the corporate world collectively shrugged and went back to demanding 40-plus hours from their workers. Spain launched a trial in 2021. Belgium changed its laws to allow 4-day work weeks in 2022. The UK ran a massive pilot program in 2022, with over 60 companies participating. The results? Consistent across every trial. Reduced hours lead to better outcomes. Healthier workers, lower turnover, equal or better productivity. The data is overwhelming. So where is the revolution? Where are the new labor laws? Where are the global campaigns to restructure work? They do not exist, because acknowledging that shorter work weeks are better would mean admitting that we have been exploiting workers unnecessarily for decades. It would mean billions in lost profits as companies adjust. It would mean a fundamental restructuring of how capitalism operates. And here is the part that should really bother you. Academic research on work hours struggles to get funding. Think about that. You want to study whether shorter work weeks improve well-being and productivity. Seems like important research, right? Something governments and corporations should want to know. Try getting a grant. Try getting institutional support. Researchers report that studies on reducing work get rejected or underfunded, while studies on increasing productivity get approved immediately, because the answer is already known. We already know shorter work weeks are better. We have known for years. The data exists. The question is not whether it works, but whether we will implement it. And the answer from power structures is no, because the system needs you working. Not because the work is necessary, but because you being busy, tired, and dependent keeps you compliant. Let me tell you what really scares them. If you work 30 hours instead of 40, you have 10 extra hours per week. That is 40 hours per month, nearly 500 hours per year. What do you do with that time? You might rest, recover, spend time with family, pursue hobbies, volunteer, get involved in your community. You might start thinking, reading, learning, organizing. Free time is dangerous. People with time on their hands start asking questions. Why is society structured this way? Who benefits? Could things be different? They attend town meetings. They protest. They vote. They demand change. A busy population is a manageable population. A population with leisure time is unpredictable. And economically, there is another issue. Consumer capitalism requires consumption. You work, you earn, you spend. But if you work less, you might spend less. You might cook instead of buying takeout. You might entertain yourself instead of paying for entertainment. You might repair things instead of replacing them. The economy, as currently structured, depends on people being too tired to do things themselves. It depends on you buying convenience because you have no time. Reduce work hours and consumption patterns change. Entire industries built on exploitation of your exhaustion would contract. Fast food, delivery services, convenience products, expensive childcare because both parents work full-time. All of it depends on you not having time. Give people time back, and the economic model breaks. So the experiments succeed. The data piles up, the evidence becomes undeniable, and nothing changes, because the people with the power to change things are the same people who profit from the current system. Corporate executives, shareholders, wealthy investors, politicians funded by corporate money. They are not going to voluntarily reduce their profits. They are not going to give up control, not without being forced. And this is why these experiments are suppressed, not hidden completely, but minimized, reported quietly, framed as interesting anomalies rather than revolutionary proof. The information is technically available but not amplified, not spread, not turned into a movement. Because if it was, if workers everywhere knew that 4-day weeks improve their lives without hurting productivity, the demands would be immediate and overwhelming. So here we are, living with proof that we do not need to work this hard, living with evidence that shorter weeks make us healthier, happier, and just as productive. Living in a world where the solution is known but not implemented, because implementing it would require sharing power and wealth, would require admitting that the exploitation was always unnecessary, was always a choice. This is what they do not want you to know. Not that the experiments happened, but that they worked. That the alternative is real. That you could be living differently right now if the system allowed it. They want you to think 40 hours is inevitable. That this is just how things are. That anyone suggesting otherwise is unrealistic or naive. But Iceland was not naive. Microsoft Japan was not unrealistic. The UK trials were not fantasy. They were proof. Concrete, measurable, undeniable proof that we have been lied to about what work has to be. And if enough people learn that truth, if enough people start demanding better, the whole illusion collapses. So yeah, subscribe to Mr. H Chronicles, because they really do not want this information spreading. They want you tired. They want you compliant. They want you believing there is no alternative. But there is. And the evidence is right there for anyone willing to look. Now let us talk about the people who never forgot. The ones still living the old way. They still exist. Right now, as you listen to this, there are people living the way your ancestors lived. Working 3 to 4 hours a day, spending the rest of their time in community, in play, in rest. Living proof that the old way never stopped working. It was just hidden, suppressed, and systematically destroyed. The Hadza people of Tanzania are one of the last remaining hunter-gatherer societies on Earth. About 1,000 people living around Lake Eyasi. And they are still doing it, still living the life that humans lived for 200,000 years. Anthropologists have studied them extensively, lived with them, measured their time. 14 to 17 hours of work per week, 3 to 4 hours per day. A Hadza man wakes up when he feels like it. No alarm. He might go hunting. might not. Depends on whether camp has food. If there is food, he stays. Talks. Plays with children. Repairs. Tools. If there is no food, he goes hunting. Comes back when he has something. That is it. That is the whole system. No boss. No schedule. No productivity metrics. Just living. Hadza women gather. Berries. The concept of working every day, whether you need to or not, does not exist. Why would you? You have food. You have shelter. You have everything you need. So you spend time with people you love, doing things you enjoy. And here is what researchers consistently note. The Hadza are happy. Genuinely, measurably happy. They laugh constantly. They sing. They dance almost every night. They have strong social bonds. Low stress. No anxiety about the future. They live entirely in the present. And they are healthier than almost any modern population. The Piraham people of the Amazon are even more extreme. They are famous among linguists because their language has no numbers, no counting system, no past or future tense. Everything exists in now. They have no word for worry. The concept does not translate. They work a couple hours a day fishing and gathering. The rest of the time they talk, they laugh, they play. Anthropologist Daniel Everett spent years with them and called them the happiest people he has ever encountered. Think about that. A society with no accumulation, no wealth, no hierarchy, no concept of working for a future that might never come. And they are happier than people in the richest countries on earth. Happier than people with retirement accounts and mortgages and career plans, because they have something we lost. They have time. They have community. They have freedom. But here is the tragedy. These cultures are disappearing. Not because they are failing, not because the lifestyle does not work, but because governments want their land, corporations want their resources, and their very existence is an inconvenience to the global economic system. The Hadza are being pushed off their land by farmers and herders. The Tanzanian government keeps trying to settle them, make them farmers, integrate them into the economy. Why? For their own good? No, because hunter-gatherers do not pay taxes. They do not participate in markets. They do not need to buy food or shelter or clothing. And that cannot be allowed. Indigenous peoples around the world face the same pressure. Settle down. Get jobs. Join civilization. Stop living the old way. And when they resist, when they try to maintain their traditional lifestyle, they are called backwards, primitive, undeveloped. They are pitied, or worse, they are forcibly removed. Their land is seized. Their children are taken and put in schools where they are taught that their culture is inferior, that their way of life is shameful, that they need to become modern. This is not ancient history. This is happening right now. The last uncontacted tribes in the Amazon are being hunted down. Loggers, miners, ranchers, all pushing deeper into the forest, killing people who have lived there for thousands of years, destroying cultures that hold knowledge we desperately need. Knowledge about how to live sustainably. And why? Why is there such urgency to eliminate these cultures? Because they are proof, living, breathing proof that the modern way is not the only way, that humans can thrive without capitalism, without states, without working themselves to death. Their existence is a threat to the entire narrative of progress. If people knew that hunter-gatherers are healthier and happier than us, they might start questioning whether civilization is actually an improvement. So indigenous knowledge is erased, not just ignored but actively destroyed. And with them, thousands of years of accumulated wisdom about how to live well. The Hadza know every plant in their environment, hundreds of species. Which ones are food, which ones are medicine, which ones are poison. This is encyclopedic knowledge passed down for generations, and it is dying because the people who hold it are dying. Aboriginal Australians maintained their culture for 65,000 years. 65,000. They had songlines, oral maps encoded in songs that allowed navigation across the entire continent. They had fire management practices that kept ecosystems healthy. They had kinship systems that maintained social harmony without police or courts. All of it developed over millennia, all of it being lost. And here is the cruelest irony. We call them undeveloped. We look at people who work 3 hours a day, who have no stress, no mental illness, no chronic disease, who live in balance with their environment, and we call them primitive. Meanwhile, we work ourselves into early graves, destroy the planet, suffer epidemic rates of depression and anxiety, and call it progress. Who is really undeveloped here? The people living sustainably and happily? Or the people racing toward ecological collapse while medicating themselves just to get through the day? Many indigenous languages do not even have a word for work as we understand it. The concept of labor as separate from life does not exist. They have words for hunting, for gathering, for making things, but not for work, because these activities are just part of living. They are not this oppressive, separate category that dominates existence. You hunt because you are hungry. You make tools because you need them. You gather because it is enjoyable. There is no split between work time and lifetime. It is all just time, all just living. English has hundreds of words related to work and labor. Employment, career, job, occupation, profession, productivity, efficiency. We have entire dictionaries of workplace jargon. We have built our language, our culture, our identity around labor. We define ourselves by what we do for money, and we think this is normal, but it is not normal. It is recent. It is the result of 10,000 years of agricultural civilization programming us to see ourselves as workers first and humans second. Indigenous cultures never made that mistake. They remained human. They never forgot what matters. Time, community, connection, play, rest, beauty, meaning, and we are destroying them for it. Because their wisdom threatens power. Because if modern people learn to live with less, to work less, to value time over money, the entire economic system would collapse. Consumer capitalism requires endless growth, endless consumption, endless labor. Indigenous cultures prove that none of it is necessary, that humans can live well, can live better, without any of it. So they must be eliminated, assimilated, modernized, taught to want things they do not need, taught to work jobs they do not want, taught to be ashamed of the lifestyle that kept their ancestors healthy and happy for thousands of years. This is cultural genocide, not with guns, though sometimes with guns, but with schools and missionaries and economic pressure and land theft. And every time an indigenous culture disappears, we lose more than history. We lose solutions. How do you live sustainably? How do you maintain mental health without medication? How do you build communities that actually support people? How do you structure society without hierarchy and exploitation? They know. They have been doing it forever, and we are killing them before we can learn. The whispered truth that nobody wants to say out loud is this: they are not primitive. They are advanced in the ways that actually matter. They have mastered the art of being human, of living well, of being happy with enough. We have mastered the art of productivity, of accumulation, of being miserable with excess, and we have the audacity to call them backwards. But some people are waking up, young people especially, rejecting hustle culture, questioning whether the career path is worth it, looking at indigenous cultures not with pity but with envy, recognizing that maybe, just maybe, the people working 3 hours a day in the forest have figured out something we forgot. The wisdom is still there, barely, hanging on in small communities around the world. The Hadza, the Piraha, a few Aboriginal groups, some Amazonian tribes, not many, and fewer every year, but they exist. Living proof that another way is possible, that the trap can be escaped if we are willing to let go of everything civilization taught us to want. They are happier than us, healthier than us, more connected than us, more free than us, and we call them undeveloped, because admitting the truth that they have what we want, what we need, what we lost, would mean questioning everything, and questions are dangerous. So the erasure continues. Quietly, deliberately, And the last people who remember how to be human are disappearing, taking their secrets with them. Here is what the people in power know but will not tell you. Your job is going to disappear. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but soon. Automation, artificial intelligence, robotics, all of it is advancing faster than anyone expected. And within the next 20 years, somewhere between 40 and 60% of current jobs will not exist anymore. Truck drivers, accountants, radiologists, lawyers, customer service, data entry, manufacturing, all of it, gone. And the elites, the CEOs, the tech billionaires, the people building these systems, they know exactly what is coming. They are planning for it. They have meetings about it. They write reports about it. But they are not talking publicly about the real question, the question that should terrify them and liberate everyone else. What happens when most humans are not needed for economic production? For 10,000 years, the system has been simple. You work or you starve. Your labor has value because production requires human effort. But what happens when it does not anymore? What happens to the billions of people whose economic function vanishes? The dystopian answer is the one they are quietly preparing for. A small elite class controlling the machines, controlling the resources, and everyone else? Unnecessary, expendable, living in poverty while wealth concentrates at the top even more than it already has. This is the future they want, where they do not need workers anymore so they do not have to share anything, where the majority of humanity becomes economically irrelevant. But there is another possibility, one they fear. Universal basic income. The idea that everyone receives enough money to live on, regardless of employment. No conditions, no means testing, just a baseline guarantee that your survival needs are met. And if that happens, if people are freed from the necessity of wage labor, everything changes. UBI experiments have been run. Real trials with real results. In Kenya, the organization Give Directly has been giving people in rural villages unconditional cash payments since 2016. The results? People do not become lazy. They do not stop working. They start businesses. They invest in education. They improve their homes. They eat better. Their mental health improves. Children stay in school longer. The entire community benefits. Finland ran a trial from 2017 to 2018. 2,000 unemployed people received €560 per month with no strings attached. What happened? Stress decreased. Mental health improved. People did not stop looking for work. They found better jobs because they were not desperate. They had the security to wait for opportunities that actually fit their skills. This is what they do not want you to know. When people have their basic needs met, they do not become parasites. They become more creative, more entrepreneurial, more engaged in their communities, because humans actually want to contribute. We want to create. We want to do meaningful things. We just do not want to be coerced. We do not want to labor under threat of starvation. But implementing UBI globally would mean a fundamental restructuring of power. Right now, employers have leverage because you need a job to survive. You tolerate bad wages, terrible conditions, meaningless work because the alternative is homelessness and starvation. But if your survival was guaranteed, if you could say no to exploitation, the entire labor market would transform overnight. Employers would have to offer good wages, good conditions, and actually meaningful work to attract anyone. Power would shift. And that terrifies them. The technology already exists for a post-scarcity world. We produce enough food to feed 10 billion people. We have enough housing, enough resources. It is maintained through distribution systems designed to concentrate wealth. We could eliminate poverty tomorrow if we chose to. We could give everyone a comfortable life. But we do not, because poverty is a weapon. It keeps people desperate, keeps them working, keeps them controlled. AI and automation could be liberation. Imagine a world where machines do the necessary labor and humans work 15 hours a week doing things they actually care about. Teaching, creating art, scientific research, community building, exploration, play. This is possible, not in some distant future. Now, We could return to hunter-gatherer work patterns while maintaining all the benefits of modern medicine, communication, and knowledge. Indigenous wisdom plus high tech. That is the optimal future. The freedom and leisure of traditional life combined with the tools and knowledge of modernity. No one working themselves to death. No one trapped in meaningless jobs. Just humans living, creating, contributing in ways that matter to them. This is what is possible. This is what they are hiding. But there is resistance. Massive resistance. Not because it would not work, but because it would redistribute power. The wealthy do not want UBI because it would reduce their control. Corporations do not want it because it would eliminate desperate workers. Politicians do not want it because it would reduce dependence on the state. Everyone currently benefiting from the system has an incentive to maintain it. So they push different narratives. That people are inherently lazy. That without the threat of poverty, society would collapse. That we cannot afford it even though we can afford endless military spending and corporate bailouts. These are lies. Lies designed to keep you trapped. Keep you believing that wage labor is the only way, that this system is the only option. But younger generations are waking up. They see the scam. They watch their parents work 40 years for pensions that do not materialize. They graduate with debt into job markets that do not pay living wages. They are told to hustle harder while watching billionaires accumulate obscene wealth. And they are done. They are questioning everything, rejecting the lie that their value is determined by productivity, demanding better. The future could be beautiful. Humans working a few hours a day on things that matter. The rest of the time spent in community, in creativity, in rest. Technology, serving humanity instead of enslaving it. Abundance shared instead of hoarded. This is not utopian fantasy. This is achievable. Right now. With the resources and technology we already have. The only question is whether we will fight for it. Whether we will demand that the gains of automation benefit everyone, or just the people who own the machines. Whether we will accept a future where most of humanity is economically irrelevant, or build a future where economic relevance stops being the measure of human worth. They know what is coming. They are preparing. So here we are, at the end of this journey, through what they did not teach you, what they did not want you to know. And maybe you are lying in the dark right now, your mind racing, thinking about everything we just covered, about hunter-gatherers working 3 hours a day, about the agricultural trap, about indigenous people who are still happy and healthy, living the old way, about experiments proving shorter work weeks are better, about a future that could free us all. And maybe you are wondering what to do with this information. How do you live in a world that demands 40 hours when you now know it is unnecessary? How do you go back to your job on Monday, knowing your ancestors had it better? How do you accept the system when you have seen the evidence that it is broken? The truth is, there are no easy answers. The system is bigger than any individual. You cannot opt out of capitalism by yourself. You cannot return to hunter-gatherer life. That world is mostly gone. The trap closed 10,000 years ago, and we are all living inside it. But knowledge is power. And you have knowledge now that most people do not have. You know that human nature is not what they told you it was. You know that we are not designed for endless labor. You know that rest is not laziness. That wanting more free time is not entitlement. That feeling exhausted and burnt out is not a personal failure. And knowing that changes things. It means you can stop feeling guilty. Stop internalizing the lie that you are not working hard enough. Stop believing that your worth is measured by your productivity. You are a human being. You are valuable simply because you exist. Your ancestors knew that. Indigenous peoples still know that. And now, you know it too. There are small rebellions you can start. Question your work hours. Push for flexibility. Support companies experimenting with 4-day weeks. Vote for politicians who talk about labor reform. Join or support unions. Demand better. Not just for yourself, but for everyone trapped in the same system. Because collective action is how change happens. It is how we got 40-hour weeks instead of 80. It is how we got weekends. It is how we will get to 30. But tonight, just let this information settle. Let it sink in. You do not have to solve everything right now. You do not have to fix the whole system before morning. Just rest, actually rest, without guilt, without feeling like you should be doing something productive. Your body needs it. Your mind needs it. You are allowed to sleep. And when you wake up, you will still be in the system. You will still have to go to work, pay bills, do what you have to do to survive. But you will know, you will carry this knowledge with you that it does not have to be this way, that for most of human history, it was not this way, that the people living differently right now are not backwards. And maybe, just maybe, that knowledge will plant a seed, a small rebellion in your mind, a question that will not go away. What would I do with 25 extra hours per week? How would I spend my time if I was not exhausted? What kind of life could I build if I was not trapped? Your ancestors worked 3 hours a day and spent the rest of their time living, really living, creating, playing, resting, connecting, being human. You are not lazy for wanting that. You are just remembering something the system tried to make you forget. So sleep well, truth seeker. Let your mind wander through these ideas as you drift off. Dream about what could be, what should be, what might still be possible, if enough of us wake up and demand better. There is more forbidden history waiting for you here on Mr. H. Chronicles. More truths they do not want spreading. More evidence that the world could be different, better, more human, but for now, rest. You have earned it. Sweet dreams.